6:47 a.m., Tuesday, Brentwood Oaks, Colorado Springs. Clang. That sharp, metallic snap sliced through the crisp Colorado morning air like a warning shot. It was the unmistakable sound of bolt cutters breaking steel, and the exact moment that Margot Wexler Hammond crossed a line she couldn't uncross. There she was, HOA president, power walker, community newsletter tyrant, standing in her white bathrobe and designer slippers, waving a clipboard at a confused tow truck driver. Cut the chain. Tow it off. That thing has been here for weeks, and it's a security risk to our neighborhood. That thing she was talking about? My black Tahoe. A government-issued DEA surveillance vehicle with federal markings, reinforced locks, hidden GPS, and $400,000 worth of covert equipment inside. Not a work truck. Not an eyesore. Not an abandoned car. It was federal property. And what she just did on camera, in full view of security footage, was a federal crime. But she didn't know that. Not yet. 8,000 miles away, undisclosed location, DEA Forward Operations Base. My phone buzzed. Not the secure line, my sister's personal number. That only rang in emergencies. I answered on the first ring. Logan. It's happening. She's actually doing it. She cut the lock. There's a tow truck. Oh my God, she's yelling at the driver. I could hear Katie's breath speeding up. She was crouched behind the living room window of Grandpa's house, phone camera pointed toward the street. Logan, she's trying to tow your government vehicle. I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at the concrete floor of my tent, adrenaline rushing through my veins faster than during half my ops in the field. My sister was 28, a third-grade teacher. She wore cardigans and read bedtime stories. And now she was documenting a felony in real time, one that could compromise everything. Get back inside. Stay safe. I'm activating the Tahoe system. I've got it from here. 3 months earlier. I never planned on getting into a war with a homeowners association. I'd faced cartel enforcers, weapons traffickers, chemical labs and basements, but nothing prepared me for the iron grip of HOA tyranny in a place called Brentwood Oaks. When Grandpa Joe passed, he left his house to me and Katie. The place still smelled like engine oil and fresh-baked cornbread. Every floorboard held a memory, every photo on the wall a lesson in quiet patriotism. He fought in Korea, ran a garage for 40 years, and kept a flag flying 365 days a year. It was supposed to be simple. I'd deploy. Katie would stay in the house. I'd rent it out later, maybe settle down when the time was right. Then came the first letter. Dear Mr. Monroe. This is an official notice of violation. Your vehicle violates Section 7 of Brentwood Oaks Community Guidelines concerning commercial vehicle storage. You are subject to a $50 per day fine. The vehicle was my DA Tahoe. Parked legally. Registered federally. Marked with government insignia. I laughed at first. Figured it was a mistake. Replied with a copy of my deployment orders and a scan of my federal vehicle registration. Then came the second letter. And the third. And the fines kept stacking. Meet Margot Wexler Hammond. 55. Hair like polished steel. Drove a white Range Rover with the custom plates HOA 1. Real estate license since 1994. HOA president for the past 8 years. Her husband Jeffrey sits on the city's zoning commission. To the untrained eye, she was just another suburban busybody with a love for perfection. To me, she quickly became the face of unchecked, small-scale authoritarianism. Katie tried to reason with her. He's a federal agent. The car's not commercial, it's government property. He's deployed. It's temporary. Margot didn't flinch. Rules are rules, Miss Monroe. Brentwood has standards. And that vehicle disrupts the visual harmony of our community. Visual harmony. We lived in a cul-de-sac of identical beige homes with perfectly trimmed hedges. But according to Margot, a black SUV with government plates parked in a driveway was visual terrorism. The pattern. Katie began noticing a disturbing trend. The Johnsons, Marine family, got a notice for a flagpole exceeding height standards. The Ramirez family, Army, fined for leaving a pair of boots outside the front door. The Hendersons, Air Force, threatened with legal action for excessive front yard signage. The signage? A welcome home banner. Every military family in Brentwood was being harassed. And Katie, God bless her, started taking notes. Screenshots. Voice memos. HOA bylaws. Community minutes. That's when we found the key detail buried in a scanned PDF of Brentwood's 1990 charter. Military and law enforcement vehicles were explicitly exempt from parking restrictions. Margot had edited them. Quietly. Without a vote. Without board approval. This was bigger than me. From where I was stationed, I had limited access to communication windows. But every time I connected, the evidence piled higher. Katie found copies of emails where Margot lobbied the city council to limit transient populations and encourage community investment by restricting temporary renters and military placements. She wasn't just strict. She wasn't just snobby. She was targeting military families. Systematically. With help from her husband's city hall connections. But then she went too far. Issuing fake fines? Bad. Changing HOA bylaws without approval? Worse. But cutting the lock on a DA vehicle? That wasn't just illegal, it was unforgivable. When she brought that tow truck at dawn, she didn't just break a lock. She triggered a chain of events that would bring the full weight of federal justice to her suburban doorstep. 6:53 a.m., Tuesday, Brentwood Oaks. By the time Katie ended the call, I'd already opened the secure control panel for my Tahoe through a satellite uplink. Federal task force vehicles aren't just cars, they're rolling surveillance units. And like any classified asset, mine had fail-safes. I tapped 2 codes into the interface. Lock override, activated. Movie camera surveillance cameras, live stream enabled. Round pushpin GPS tracer, signal strong. Stop sign movement lockdown, engaged. If that tow truck driver had managed to hook up the vehicle, he'd have triggered a Homeland Security alert, a kill switch disabling the engine, and a federal database flag that would light up every law enforcement system in the state. Thankfully, he backed off. But the damage was already done. On 3 separate angles, my vehicle's interior camera, Katie's iPhone, and a neighbor's Ring doorbell, we had crystal clear video of Margot cutting through a security chain labeled with a federal warning tag. The tag read, "Property of U.S. Department of Justice. Unauthorized removal punishable under 18 U.S.C. Section 641. Margot had no idea what she'd just stepped into. 8:30 a.m., Fort Carson Legal Division, Colorado Springs. By the time my next call window opened, Katie had already contacted someone I trusted more than most family. Captain Dana Ruiz, JAG Corps, formerly CID, now embedded with Federal Operations Support. I'd worked with her on joint task force deployments. She didn't blink during interrogations, didn't flinch at cartel threats, and had a talent for quoting federal law the way most people quoted movies. When Katie sent her the footage, Dana didn't laugh. She cursed. She cut a federal lock, attempted to remove a DOJ surveillance vehicle, and obstructed access to federal property. Jesus Christ, Monroe. This woman thinks she's running a subdivision, not interfering with national security. She'd already filed an initial brief to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Colorado by the time she called me. They'll treat this as attempted theft of federal property, obstruction of justice, and possibly unlawful surveillance if we can prove she accessed equipment inside. I've got GPS logs of her standing by the driver's door 16 times over 3 days. I've got high-def video of her using a flashlight to inspect the dashboard at 1:42 a.m. Then we've got her. The neighborhood uprising begins. Katie wasn't alone anymore. Once the word got out that Margot had tried to tow a federal law enforcement vehicle, neighbors started talking. Quietly, at first, whispered conversations over mailboxes, side glances across backyard fences. Then, the tide shifted. Tom Henderson, retired Air Force colonel, showed up at Grandpa's house with a clipboard and 24 affidavits. She fined me for flying the POW MIA flag. Said it wasn't aesthetically compliant. Maria Torres, a Navy widow, brought photo evidence of her late husband's medals, and the violation notice Margot had issued her for displaying them in a front window. The Ramirez twins, Army brats who grew up in Brentwood, shared how Margot once threatened to report their parents for excessive yard gatherings when they hosted a military family barbecue. Margot hadn't just overreached. She had weaponized HOA policy to target military families, and now they were organizing. Katie's accidental revolution. Katie always was the quiet one. Straight-A student. Book lover. Introvert. But something snapped the day she watched a woman in a silk robe commit a felony in front of her childhood home. She dug in like a seasoned prosecutor. Retrieved the original HOA bylaws from a dusty banker's box in Grandpa's attic, proving Margot had forged amendments. Cross-referenced community fines for the last 3 years, identifying a 92% targeting rate against military households. Found Margot's emails to the zoning board, suggesting removal of transient tenants as a pathway to increased real estate value. She wasn't a teacher anymore. She was a tactical data analyst with a war to fight. Jeffrey's real estate game. Then came the twist. Buried in the public records of Brentwood County, Katie found something that turned our battle into a war. A memorandum of understanding between a company called Summit Ridge Developments and Jeffrey Hammond, Margot's husband. It outlined a plan to purchase 24 properties in Brentwood Oaks over the next 18 months, including 8 belonging to current or recently sighted military families. Prices listed were 25% below current market value. Logan, Katie said on our next call, they've been trying to drive us out. Not just us, all of us. They create fake violations, rack up fines, then pressure families into selling at a loss. This wasn't just petty harassment. It was organized financial displacement, using the HOA as a weapon for profit. Margot's response, panic. The day after the tow truck fiasco, Margot doubled down. She called a community emergency meeting. Issued new letters to every household, claiming active security risks due to unsanctioned government operations on Logan Monroe's property. She hired a private security firm, Oak Shield Protective, to begin hourly surveillance of my Tahoe. Katie caught one of their guards photographing the dashboard. When she confronted him, he said, "Ma'am, military vehicles have been flagged as potential domestic risk factors. We're monitoring for community safety." The phrase stuck with me. Potential domestic risk factors. That wasn't safety talk. That was coded bigotry, wrapped in bureaucracy. They weren't just after my SUV. They were coming after our entire identity, as a military family, as defenders of country, as citizens who didn't fit Margot's perfect narrative of curated suburbanism. Captain Ruiz's response, beautiful. When I sent her the Oak Shield footage, she didn't hesitate. Unauthorized surveillance of DOJ equipment constitutes federal espionage. I'm contacting their licensing office. Their agents are done. And just like that, they disappeared. One call. One warning. One federal investigation threat. But Margot didn't stop. She couldn't. Because it was never just about my car. It was about control. Wednesday morning, Brentwood Oaks. Katie found the slashed tires just after sunrise. All 4 flat. The words military trash spray-painted across her windshield in dripping red. The kind of red that looks too much like blood when you're still groggy from sleep. She called me from the driveway, holding back sobs. They vandalized my car, Logan. It was parked on Grandpa's side yard. I didn't hear anything last night, just woke up in. The crunch of glass under her sandals broke my focus. The sounds from home hit harder than anything I'd heard during deployment. It wasn't just her car. It was a message. They wanted her scared. They wanted her silent. But instead, they woke up something in both of us. 2 hours later, at the school, Katie was called into the principal's office. Not for sympathy, but for a wellness meeting. There have been complaints, Principal Dolan said, not meeting her eyes. Some parents are concerned that the situation at your home may be creating an unsafe environment. Translation? Margot had taken her campaign from our driveway into Katie's career. We were no longer just dealing with HOA fines. We were under coordinated social attack. What did Katie do? She smiled, reached into her bag, and slid her phone across the desk. Here's the footage of private security guards photographing federal law enforcement equipment without authorization. And here's the email from the DEA confirming the vehicle's designation. Do you still think I'm the security threat here, Mr. Dolan? To his credit, the man turned pale. The veterans started showing up. By Thursday, word had spread through every military family in Brentwood Oaks and beyond. Retired Navy SEALs, Army medics, Air Force engineers, men and women with decades of service, all with HOA horror stories of their own. Tom Henderson, the retired colonel, organized the first neighborhood roundtable in Grandpa's backyard. They called it Operation Liberty Fence, and they were dead serious. They picked the wrong damn house, Tom said. This isn't just harassment. This is organized intimidation targeting service families. It ends now. Each brought something. Signed letters, HOA notices, photos, financial records, video clips of Margot yelling at veterans' wives. And then came the first real break in the case. The paper trail. Katie was sorting through old HOA newsletters when she found it. A tiny financial note at the bottom of a 2019 budget report. Consulting fee, Horizon Community Advisors, $38,500. She ran a search. Horizon was owned by Jeffrey Hammond. More entries followed. $42,000 for landscape optimization consultation. $18,000 for branding redevelopment. All paid to shell companies either owned by or linked to Jeffrey's development firm. Logan, Katie said, pacing around Grandpa's dining room table, they're stealing HOA funds. And no one's looking. She'd already sent everything to Captain Ruiz. The response came back in all caps. This is mail fraud. This is wire fraud. This is RICO. That was the moment everything shifted. The recall begins. HOA boards aren't unbreakable. They can be challenged, overthrown, legally removed. Katie began circulating petitions. To trigger a recall vote in Brentwood Oaks, they needed 25% of homeowners to sign a formal request. Katie got 33% in the first 36 hours. People who'd been silent for years suddenly wanted their voices back. Mrs. Kramer, 78, fined for unsightly curtains, showed up with cookies and a signature. The Kowalskis, Polish immigrants whose sons served 2 tours in Iraq, offered to print flyers. The Nguyen's, former refugees, brought a binder of fines for having non-native vegetation in their backyard. This wasn't just a campaign anymore. It was a movement. Margot's counterattack. She panicked. Issued emergency code violation letters to anyone who signed the recall petition. Unapproved trash can location. Improper mailbox alignment. Patriotic displays exceeding HOA limits. Katie took photos. Kept everything. That's when Mrs. Patterson, our 91-year-old neighbor who'd lost 2 sons in Vietnam, walked over with tears in her eyes. Your grandfather would have been proud of you, Katie, she said. I've lived under this woman's thumb for 8 years. But I'm not scared anymore. She handed Katie something wrapped in tissue paper. A Silver Star medal. He wanted you to have it. Meanwhile, in the shadows, Margot wasn't done. Katie found a tracking device under her car, a cheap GPS model wired to the undercarriage. Captain Ruiz confirmed it. Illegal. Unlicensed. Likely installed by private investigators. The scope of Margot's operation was expanding beyond HOA abuse. We were now looking at witness intimidation, wire fraud, surveillance of federal assets, financial conspiracy, and now, potentially, domestic terrorism enhancements. Ruiz activated her network. Federal agents were assigned to shadow Katie. Plain clothes, unmarked cars, coffee cups and sidearms. Every time Margot thought she was watching Katie, someone was watching her. Friday, Brentwood Oaks, 2:12 p.m. Katie stood in Grandpa's study, paper dust on her hands and truth in her eyes. Logan, they were planning this before Grandpa died. She'd found a confidential HOA memo, dated 6 months before we inherited the house, tucked between meeting minutes from 2019. It was labeled Willow Initiative, Phase 2 Acquisition Strategy. Prepared by Wexler Hammond Group, for internal review only. The memo detailed a roadmap for transitioning 30-plus Brentwood Oaks properties to a private development deal with Summit Ridge Developments, Jeffrey Hammond's firm. The key targets? Elderly residents without heirs. Military families with deployment cycles. Owners with existing HOA violations. Our house, Grandpa's house, was on page 3. Labeled as available pending pressure outcome. Katie didn't say anything for a long time. Just stood there, holding the paper like it was radioactive. They weren't enforcing rules. They were manufacturing pressure to force families to sell. The fake violations scheme. Over the next 24 hours, Katie and the Veteran Coalition uncovered over 50 falsified violation letters. Same formatting. Same language. All generated from Margot's personal email address, not the HOA's shared server. Some were backdated. Some referenced rules that didn't exist in the official bylaws. And each targeted active duty military members, elderly homeowners, widows, single parents. We cross-referenced those violation dates with property transfers. At least 14 homes had sold within 90 days of receiving their final warning. 9 were purchased by shell companies linked to Summit Ridge Developments. 7 were already under demolition permits for high-end townhomes. Katie's voice was cold when she said it. They're flipping our neighborhood. One eviction at a time. A federal reckoning begins. Captain Ruiz handed the case over to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Colorado. The terms being used in their internal memos now included mail fraud, conspiracy to deprive civil rights, interference with federal operations, RICO predicate offenses. But it was the civil rights element that tipped everything over. HOA governance is supposed to be about landscaping and mailbox paint, not institutionalized targeting of military families for financial gain. That's when we got the call. We're assigning a civil rights team and a financial crimes unit, Assistant U.S. Attorney Alicia Kim said. Your sister's documentation is one of the most complete discrimination records we've ever seen outside of government housing. Katie wasn't just a victim anymore. She was now a primary witness in a federal civil rights case. The final straw, the burn pile. Saturday night, Katie caught it on camera. Margot, in a dark hoodie and slippers, stumbling through our backyard, lugging a metal trash can and a gallon of lighter fluid. She started feeding it with shredded paper. In the shadows, our motion sensor cameras lit her up like a stage spotlight. Infrared showed her lips moving, frantic, pacing, tossing in whole folders now. The contents? HOA financial records, invoices, meeting notes, all with Summit Ridge letterheads. Katie watched through her bedroom window and whispered into the phone. She's burning evidence. Within minutes, that video was in federal hands. Margot had just committed document destruction under active federal investigation. Sunday, community uprising. By morning, the neighborhood had changed. Mr. Henderson's flag flew at half-mast, in quiet protest. Mrs. Patterson sat in a lawn chair by her Tahoe with a thermos of coffee and a .38 tucked in her purse. The Ramirez twins walked the block with a clipboard and a petition for emergency board removal. And then it happened. The recall threshold was met. 67% of the neighborhood had signed. The HOA board was now subject to emergency vote under Colorado Statute 38 to 33.3. "It's over," Katie said softly. "We're taking our neighborhood back. Margot's last gamble, go national." Margot wasn't done. She hired a crisis PR firm, Morrison & Green, notorious for handling celebrity meltdowns and political scandals. Within 48 hours, a local news piece aired claiming, "A Colorado community faces disruption as a rogue military vehicle and armed veterans form what some residents describe as a neighborhood militia." The article quoted anonymous sources. Suggested instability, fear for children, unregistered weapons. It was textbook narrative warfare, painting us as unhinged, unstable, dangerous. But they underestimated two things: the power of documentation, the wrath of military families wronged. Katie's counterstrike. The same day the article aired, Katie sent a digital package to every newsroom, city official, and congressional rep in the district. A timeline of harassment. Photos of Margot trespassing. Video of the bolt cutter incident. Audio of security guards threatening her. HOA bylaws with red lines. Evidence of falsified fines. And the acquisition memo with our home's address circled in red. The response was immediate. 2 city council members called for Jeffrey Hammond's resignation. Veteran organizations began tweeting under #ProtectBrentwood. And 3 federal agents showed up at the Brentwood Oaks HOA office with a search warrant. Monday, Brentwood Oaks Community Center, 9:01 a.m. Federal Marshal Angela Torres stood outside the HOA meeting room, flanked by 2 DOJ agents in plain suits. She looked calm. Professional. Like someone who'd arrested cartel lieutenants in 5 countries and was now about to detain a woman wearing a linen blazer and pearl earrings. Inside the meeting room, the scene was surreal. Margot Wexler Hammond sat at the head of the community table like she always had. Flanked by 2 remaining board members, both visibly sweating. Outside, local news vans were already parked. And veterans in uniform lined the sidewalk in silent watch. Katie stood near the entrance, holding a folder thick with evidence. The atmosphere? Electric. Like a courtroom seconds before a verdict. Marshal Torres stepped in, showed her badge. "Mrs. Wexler Hammond. You are under arrest for attempted theft of federal property, obstruction of federal justice, civil rights conspiracy, destruction of evidence, and wire fraud under the Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act." The moment hung in the air. Then came the sound that no HOA president expects in her lifetime. Click. Click. The unmistakable snap of federal cuffs. Margot's response? "This is absurd. I am the president of this community. You people have no jurisdiction here. This is private property." Torres didn't even blink. "You committed crimes involving federal assets, and now you're going to answer for them." The entire room, veterans, neighbors, even the camera crew, went completely still. Then one voice broke the silence. Mrs. Patterson, cane in hand, standing at the back. "About damn time." Meanwhile, outside. As Margot was led out between news cameras and murmuring residents, Jeffrey Hammond made his move. He tried sneaking out the back, through the emergency exit. Right into the waiting arms of 2 IRS financial crimes agents, who'd been monitoring him for days. They didn't make a scene. Just showed him a warrant. "Mr. Hammond, you're being detained in connection with an ongoing investigation into municipal fraud and financial conspiracy involving public office abuse." They walked him past the cameras, trying to stay out of frame. Didn't work. By nightfall, that clip would be all over national television. Katie takes the stage. With Margot in custody and Jeffrey exposed, the HOA meeting took on a new tone. Serious. Somber. But something else, too, hope. Tom Henderson stood in motion for Katie to approach the podium. "This community owes you more than we can say," he said. "You stood up when no one else could." Katie stepped forward. Hands trembling. Then steady. "This started with a vehicle," she said. "But it was never just about a truck in a driveway. It was about dignity. About families being bullied out of their homes. About what happens when one person uses power to silence an entire community." Silence. Then applause. Then a standing ovation that shook the community center's walls. "My grandfather always said the strongest people are the ones who stand up for others, not just themselves." That's what we did. And we're not done. The media storm. By evening, #BrentwoodJustice was trending nationally. CNN ran the story under the headline, "HOA President Arrested for Targeting Military Families." Fox News called it, "Veterans Fight Back Against Suburban Tyranny." Military Times featured Katie and titled their article, "The Teacher Who Took Down an HOA Crime Ring." Interviews poured in. Katie turned most down. But she accepted one with the local CBS affiliate. "I didn't want fame. I wanted my family to stop living in fear. I wanted veterans to be respected. And I wanted my grandfather's name to stand for something bigger than a mailbox fine." The fallout. Over the next 72 hours, the dominoes fell fast. The entire Brentwood HOA board resigned. Katie was voted interim president by unanimous community vote. All accounts were frozen pending federal audit. Jeffrey Hammond's real estate firm lost $4.2 million in contracts overnight. City council meetings were flooded with angry residents demanding change. But the most powerful change came quietly, on porches, in driveways, between neighbors who finally felt safe enough to talk again. For the first time in years, Brentwood Oaks felt like a community. Grandpa's house becomes headquarters. The dining room that once held family dinners now held FBI affidavits, HOA petitions, civil rights legal memos, a whiteboard titled Freedom Strategy. And at the center of it all, Katie. Her teaching instincts translated effortlessly into leadership. Organizing residents. Assigning research. Helping other families in nearby neighborhoods start their own recall petitions. She had become what none of us expected. A reluctant revolutionary. A protector. And a national symbol of what happens when good people fight back the right way. 1 week later, Brentwood Oaks, Grandpa's porch. Katie sat with her laptop on the front steps, flanked by a potted flag and an old photo of Grandpa Joe in uniform. She was answering her 78th email of the day, this one from a woman in Georgia who'd been fined for keeping her son's army boots on the porch. "I just wanted someone to say this wasn't okay. Thank you for being that someone." There were hundreds more like it. From Kentucky, Texas, Nevada, Florida. Different states. Same abuse. Same weaponization of HOA codes to drive out veterans, renters, immigrants, or undesirables. And they were all looking at Katie Monroe as the woman who'd fought back and won. The federal spotlight turns on. The Justice Department held a joint press conference with the U.S. Attorney's Office. At the podium stood Alicia Kim, Assistant U.S. Attorney. This case uncovered a deliberate pattern of discrimination, fraud, and suppression, targeting military families and manipulating HOA power for personal gain. It is not isolated. And it will not be ignored. Behind her stood 3 DOJ investigators. To her left, Captain Dana Ruiz, in full dress uniform, arms crossed. To her right, Katie Monroe, in a navy cardigan and calm resolve. The DOJ announced. Federal review of HOA practices nationwide. Recommendations to Congress for HOA reform. Launch of a hotline for reporting HOA abuse of military and minority homeowners. Katie didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her work was already speaking louder than any microphone ever could. The Monroe Foundation. Within 2 weeks, donations started pouring in. A nonprofit was formed, the Monroe Foundation for Community Defense. Its mission was clear: provide legal assistance to families facing HOA abuse, offer grants to military homeowners wrongfully fined, create a national database of abusive HOA boards. By the end of the month, they'd received $140,000 in private donations, pro bono commitments from 26 attorneys across 11 states, endorsements from 3 major veteran organizations. The foundation's headquarters? Grandpa's dining room. Where it all began. Brentwood's transformation. The neighborhood that once punished you for a yellow mailbox now looked completely different. Flags of all sizes waved on front porches. Kids rode bikes without fear of noise citations. Neighbors held backyard barbecues again, loud, smoky, joyful. Katie passed new bylaws protecting active duty and veteran families, free expression of cultural or patriotic identity, oversight of any HOA fine process. She also created rotating leadership, so no single person would ever hold power the way Margot had. Brentwood had become a blueprint for ethical, transparent neighborhood governance. The Karen effect goes viral. Margot's arrest became shorthand for suburban authoritarianism. Late-night shows ran sketches. T-shirts popped up with the phrase, "Don't be a Margot." She became a case study in multiple law schools. Her downfall featured in podcasts, TikTok explainers, even military legal briefings. And as her story faded from the headlines, Katie's only grew louder. Because what started as a story about one vehicle became a rallying cry for something bigger. Congress hears the call. 2 months later, Representative Daniel Cordero, a veteran and congressman from Arizona, introduced the Military Homeowners Protection Act, MHPA. It proposed federal oversight of HOA regulations impacting military and minority families, limits on unapproved fines or code changes, civil recourse pathways for HOA abuse victims. Katie was asked to testify. In front of Congress, she told her story quietly. Without anger. Without tears. I didn't start this to change the country. I just wanted to protect my home. But when enough homes are under attack, silence becomes surrender. The bill didn't just pass. It passed with bipartisan support. The final note. 3 months after Margot's arrest, Katie stood at Grandpa's grave, holding the silver star Mrs. Patterson had given her. "You always told me to stay out of fights that didn't concern me. But this one did, Grandpa. Because it started with your house. And now it's for every house." She left the medal on his headstone. Not as a goodbye. As a promise.